Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining the webinar on efficiently grading residential projects in Civil 3D. My name is Terry Radaman. I'm a senior technical specialist at ATG. Been in the industry for about 25 years, doing mostly civil work, site, did a little bit of architecture work, and product expertise are AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Map 3D, InfraWorks, and Esri products, ArcGIS. So today's agenda, we're going to focus on a couple topics here. We're going to go through and discuss and set up some advanced subassemblies and our corridors. We're going to set up our corridors, an efficient way to grade residential projects. When we talk about roadway design is using corridors. So that's the approach we're going to take. Historically, I think a lot of folks have been using feature lines to grade their roadways, and we're going to set up some conditional statements for our driveways and some other targeting for our corridors as well. And then we'll get into side lot grading and residential pad grading. And we'll also be getting into some automated label placing. This webinar, we're going to be focusing on CTC tools. And so a lot of the approach I'm not going to do manually, but we'll use a lot of their tool sets to develop our finished grade surface and our corridor modeling, or just modeling in general. So yeah, with our assemblies, conditional assemblies, we're going to go and set up an assembly with our conditional subassemblies to focus more on driveway entrances. So when there is a driveway, we'll set up our assemblies to depress the curb and generate a driveway up to a sidewalk and then all the way out to our pad. We're going to look at labeling our subassemblies with Label Genie, probably more focused with Label Genie on adding spot elevations and slope elevations on our design, just for a design check. For our corridors, we're going to extract some feature lines to use for a right-of-way. So we'll take our corridor model out to the right-of-way. We'll extract some feature lines from our corridor surface, and then we'll look at the targets for that as far as offset and elevations as well. For our side lot grading, we're going to focus in on a CTC tool called Autograder. Autograder, there's really three types of grading styles. There's perpendicular, more for side lot grading, parcel line grading. There's a parallel family, which is used quite a bit on retention ponds. Think of it as like a step offset, the standard Civil 3D command. And we're going to be, we'll use that a bit. I don't think, actually, we might not use that too much, but we'll be focusing in on the perpendicular type. And then there's another style called template insertion. And template insertion is another way to grade in Autograder that will lay down pads for us. So we'll look at our templates, and what we'll do is we'll run Autograder and place those pads down in our lots for our building pads. And then we'll look at Label Genie and labeling our design features, mostly focusing on some of the spot elevations and slopes. All right, so I'm going to be using Civil 3D 2022, the latest and greatest. I've been demoing this a bit and using the latest CTC tools. The latest CTC tools came out not too long ago for 2022, and there's some advancements on some of those functions as well. So just some housekeeping before we get started. If there's questions, there's a Q&A section in our Zoom meeting, and I'm going to go through the demo, and then if we have some time, we can discuss some of these questions. And If I don't know the answer, then at the end of the presentation, I have an email address. You can email me the question, and then I'll talk to our group and see if we can get this thing figured out. The CTC tools that we're going to be using are primarily on this Sim Project Suite tab. This is a tool set that was developed to help with some of the inefficiencies with Civil 3D. The way some of the objects work, you have to go through several menu systems or select on one object at a time to go through its properties and change certain aspects of the feature. So CTC tools developed this tool set to help create efficiencies in some of these tasks. So primarily what we're going to be working in is Autograder for our grading objects. We're going to touch a little on Corridormapper and Corridor Cleanup. And we're going to also touch on Label Genie as well. So on my screen, I have a corridor of a roadway segment. I have alignment. We're going to build out another corridor here. I have this kind of for our demo. We'll end up grading some lots around the outside here and go through that approach. Both these corridors have profiles. And to start, we have our subassemblies here, our assemblies and our subassemblies. So with this, we're going to go ahead and start by looking at some of these conditional statements. Everybody probably used corridors before in subassemblies. So basically it's a section of our roadway. We have our control. This is our control that's following the alignment horizontally and the profile vertically. So the alignment gets pushed along this assembly gets pushed along our alignment. It follows our profile and it follows our actual alignment. So with that, for our subassemblies to build these out, we can look at some of the components on here, and we'll look at some of the conditional statements and targeting. So right now, when we start building subassemblies, most of the time we'll have half a road. On each side, we'll have a full road segment, and we'll have a segment that we can use for our conditional statement, or conditional targeting. The benefit of conditional targeting is so we're not cutting up our corridor into many regions. We can develop an assembly with a curb and a driveway and a sidewalk, and we can chop up our regions and assign a different subassembly to that section. But using conditional statements, we can reduce the amount of assemblies that we have, and also the amount of regions that we create through our model. So with that, the way conditional statements work, I'm not going to go through too much of the roadway segments. Basically, we have different lane segments, and if you go through your panel here on your palette, to get to your palette, everything now has been moved to the view ribbon, and the palettes is right here. So we can turn on our tool palettes. We can look at the stock tools through here. And a lot of these are just basic subassemblies that you can pull from the menu here. Under our conditional statements, we do have a few under conditional. And the one that we're going to be looking at is this conditional targeting horizontally. So let's go ahead and start by copying. We'll just go ahead and place a new assembly and start building one out. So I'm going to go and we'll create a new assembly. We'll use basic for our code sets. We'll leave it on all code sets, and we'll just go ahead and start with that. Clicking our point in here, and So a lot of times I can go through the list here and find different components. And another easy approach is just to copy. So I'm just going to go ahead and take some of these subassemblies out of an existing assembly and apply it to mine. So again, we can just click on the object. When you click on it on our contextual ribbon, we'll have some basic commands that we can use for our subassemblies, and I'm just going to copy these, and I can click on my assembly and add them in there. For our conditional statements, we're going to go ahead and use this conditional statements. We have our road. On our road assembly, we can assign our different slopes and widths. We can also look at targeting to make our lanes wider or smaller by targeting the outside width. We're going to go and place a couple conditional statements. So when you place a conditional statement, you basically get a target found and a target not found. And so we're going to place that. We can go here and go through our properties. And we have a target found. And let's go ahead and change this slope to 1 here. And then we'll add another one here as well. And we'll set this one to target not found. We'll set this one to 2 to 1 as well, just for a layout slope here. All right. So what this means is there's going to be, we'll set up a line, a feature line, or some object that says that if this is located in a certain distance, we're going to do one or the other option here. So on here, we have a distance on the properties for our conditional statement. We have a maximum distance to look out from and it actually goes from the center line of the roadway, not the beginning of the subassembly. So we're going to go out 60 feet and have it look 60 feet. And if it's not found, then we'll go out at 60 feet as well. All right. So basic conditional statements. When it's not found, it's going to run what you want to push down for the corridor. In our case, we're going to have sidewalk and curb on most of ours. So we'll have this as a not found, and then when we have a found polyline, it's basically going to develop our driveway. So how this was generated was basically this point here and this point here ties in from this point here to his point here. So when I transition from a target found and not found, my sidewalk should line up, and they're in the same location vertically and horizontally based off of the control of the slope of the road and the location of my control points for my, for my flow lines. And so this will be coming up and this will match here, and then we'll just take it to a certain point and just end it. What we can do is we can target this to our building pad. So when we have our driveway and our pads laid out, we can have our curb depressed, slope up, and our sidewalk, and then we can have this extend to our building pad. So I have that on both sides of our corridor or our assembly here. We have a target found, target not found. Basically, it's the same situation. I've named these accordingly just for good, easier location through the tools that we're going to use, like Corridormapper, but also you can do this manually as well. You can go through the properties, the targets, and find the subassembly, and then add the line to that. And so this will be our right driveway, and this will be our left driveway. All right, so let's get started here. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and place this corridor. I have one here that we'll use for our design for our pads, and I'm just going to go through and show you a couple tools that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and place a corridor in here. Our corridor is going to be road B here, and it's part of our alignment, and our alignment will be B, and our layout will be our layout profile, and then we'll use our 50-foot full subassembly, and we're not going to set targets now, and we won't even set regions. We'll just go ahead and go and place our corridor. So we have line work here in our CAD file. Basically, we have curb and gutter, we have a buffer area, we have a sidewalk, and we have our right-of-way line. Most of the times when we're grading roadways for sites, for residential sites, we'll grade from up to the right-of-way. And so our assembly matches our road cross-section. And so with that, it's gone through and lines up pretty well with our curb and gutter and our sidewalk. So I'm just going to go ahead and take our corridor and just tie it to, bring it up to this, our curb return here. And bring this one back to this curb return here. All right, so with this conditional statement, it basically is not finding any targets to target to put in our driveway. So if we look at this and we'll look at it in Object Viewer, it's basically taking our corridor and adding curb all the way down our roadway. All right, so what we can do is manually, we can put a line in here and say, you know, we want a driveway here. We can build out a driveway. If it's in our range, which was 60 feet here, we can take this and we can go to our corridor properties and we can target that conditional statement for our driveways. And we can go through here and add this object to our driveway. And we can do this for each one, which would be pretty time consuming. I think this was right. Driveway right, and we'll hit OK, and then we'll hit OK, and then we'll rebuild. So now we've added this target, it's depressed our driveway, it's added our sidewalk, and it's extended our driveway out now. So we can go through, do this manually, and add all these different targets. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy here, and what we'll do is we'll look at another approach to building these targets. And so I've laid out some lines here that represent my driveway locations. I have left and right, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy these guys up to this point here, and we'll use this as our driveway targeting. And so what we can do is we can go through and do this all manually. What the other approach is to take and use this Corridormapper tool. So with Corridormapper, we can set our targets. This tool basically is an easy way to target your corridor. So we're going to go to Corridormapper and we're going to set up our targets. So first thing we'll want to do is we'll want to select on our corridor. All right, so this is the Corridormapper interface. Basically what it does is it reads the subassembly and it looks at each of the components and lists out all the subassemblies that you can target. And so what we're going to do is we have our conditional right statement and we have our conditional left. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and instead of clicking on each object, what we can do is we can specify a layer. So we want good layer management, we want good control over our targets. And so the targets that I created on two different layers. There's a target condition driveway right and a driveway left. So what I can do is assign that target to a layer and those objects on those layers. So I don't have to go through and click on each one of those objects. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the right conditional statement to the layer that has my lines on it called target condition right. And I'm just going to apply that. It'll go through and tell me how many it found. It found 19. Actually, I think that's an offset or length, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit yes on this and go through. And you'll notice that it's gone through and added driveways for each of these. So why would we use this? Because this makes it a lot easier for us to deal with our targets. The other thing is we can take this line and copy it, and as long as it's on the same layer, I can go through and add more driveways or targets and manipulate these pretty easily. So we'll go here and we'll go back to our corridor mapper, and then we'll auto assign targets. It already knows that layer, and we'll go through the corridor. And again, it'll tell us that we've added 3 more driveways. We can hit yes, and again, it'll go through and add our driveways in. So easy function to target our objects. What we're going to do now is just, we can go through and clear these. We have driveways on the right and left. I have it set up here as well. And we can go through and place our targets to do our conditional statements. The other thing we can do is go through here and clean up our corridor, which removes our targets. So I'm just going to go through here, corridor cleanup. It resets our targets and just removes the targets. And we're just going to remove those guys. All right. So Corridormapper, really easy functional tool to do our design and our targeting. I have our corridor laid out here. I've extracted 2 feature lines out of this corridor. I'll go ahead and do that on here. When you go through your corridor, you select on, you go to your contextual ribbon, you can extract a feature line. I'm going to click on this line here and this line here. This is my edge of my right of way. And so that's where I'm going to start my grading. I'm going to go and hit enter here. It brings up this little function, this dialog that tells us what components we clicked. And what I'm going to do is just turn these guys off. And then we can set our sites when we build our feature lines, and we'll just extract those 2 guys there. So we have these 2 feature lines extracted. What I like to do, and what I've done on this bottom segment, is basically take this, right click on it, and you can remove its dynamic link. So one thing with feature lines from corridors, they can be linked dynamically to the object, and we can remove those just by right clicking on it. We can keep them. For this demo, I'm going to detach them just because we're going to do some offsets and some other things to them. So with that, I'm going to go and remove those, and we'll go down to this guy here. All right, so we have our feature line for our edge of our right of way. Click on our feature line. We have some great built-in tools to deal with feature lines. We have step offset. You can fill it radius. These are elevation points, and these are our geometry, our horizontal modifications to our feature line. So we can go through here and identify our feature lines in different segments here. And basically it's taken it, it's draped on the corridor. If we view this on 3D, it would be right in line with that. So with this feature line, this is going to control our grading. We're going to use Autograder to develop our side lots and our pads. So with this being our control, we have our layout. These are our pads. We have 3 different type of pads here. We have a pad A, B, and C. Pad A is sloping towards the roadway. Pad B has an elevation high point in the middle of the pad, sloping in either direction. And then the opposite for road for pad C. And so with that, we're going to start by using this pad A and look at our grading for that. So now that we have our control for our roadway, this is what it's going to use in order to develop our pads and our side lots. What we're going to do is we're going to take our lots out of our basic CAD drawing, and we're going to create feature lines out of them. So what we can do is we can go to our home tab, we can go to feature lines from objects. We can click on this little handy thing here down. It says XREF. So we'll click on our XREFs. We'll go ahead and select our feature line. I'm just going to drag through here and grab the rest of these guys here, and we'll hit enter. And so we have a couple options here. We want to put it in site 1. We'll let it name it however it wants to name them. We're just going to use basic feature lines, and we're going to use the layer for our objects here. So I'm going to hit OK. So now we have all these feature lines. One thing that I want to bring up is feature line style hierarchy. So I extracted this line out of the corridor. If I would have if my hierarchy would have had this style, which is basic, higher than my corridor style, it would have changed the elevation at this point to 0, because my feature lines, I just created them. I didn't assign any values to them. I didn't assign any elevations, and we noticed that it's set to 806. So it's taken the feature line from our corridor and assigned it to our lot line. So how do we get to there? You would think it's under settings. It is not. If you go to our prospector, and if you go to our site, and if you go to our site, the site we're dealing with, and if you go to our feature lines here, if you right click on it and go to properties, you'll see under this tab called options, this is our feature line hierarchy. So what this means is if I would have created a basic feature line style, if I had 2 crossing lines, it's going to take this style if it's above my corridor grading. My corridor grading feature line style, this purple one, is on the very top. That means that it's always, if any line touches it, it's always going to take that elevation and apply it to our feature lines, that style that is below. So that's how that worked. And so now I have a good point here with my feature line starting at the beginning of the right of way and then going down. Not really going to worry about how it's going down. What I did was I stepped offset this guy at the back of my lot just to have a feature line here. It wasn't really necessary, but we know that this point here and this feature line is elevated to the sky here. So what we need is, when we're running Autograder, we're going to want to need a control. Okay, so how Autograder works. Basically, Autograder is a function of grading that uses 3 different types of offsets. And we talked about them before. There's basically perpendicular, parallel, and then template. So I have some in here already. I will look at building some new ones. Basically, what we can do is review some of the old ones, and we'll go through and look at how we create them. So with that, when we create a new family, so intentionally called families, a grading family, and within this grading family are different components. So down at the bottom here, we see a nice little visual of the actual grading family. If I go through my lot A, it has a parent and it has different components, basic slopes. So my parent is going to be my feature line that I used, that I identified as a parent. So at this lot line, it's going to go up. It's going to go up, it's going to flatten out, and it's going to go back down. We can look at the objects in here through the little visual screen here. So our pad B and our pad A. So our pads are basically, it's targeting the line here, and it's going at a % to our actual pad. And this pad is defined in our drawing as well. So with that, let's look at some of these components here. So we'll go ahead and we'll edit our family. And this is basically our pad. So what this is basically a line that connects our right-of-way feature line to our pad beginning. And so what I'm doing here is I'm assigning a name, which is pad A, the object, which is pad A here, this guy, and then I'm assigning a base point. And my base point is going to be the midpoint of my pad. I want my pad centered between the right-of-ways. And so that's what we would do. And then the rotation of the pad is perpendicular to our little control line here, which is our parent. Our parent, we can go through and we can select it through our drawing, or we can go through and we can select it through our drawing and select that guy, or we can set up filters. And filters is basically, you can set different layers for those objects. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but let me go ahead and just go through the rest of this. So what it's doing is from our parent, which is our right-of-way, it's sloping at 30 feet at 4%, and it's going 30 feet at 4%. and it's going to locate that pad at that distance. So we should expect the pad to be 30 feet back at 4% higher than the midpoint between these two right-of-ways. For our side lots, we have different families as well. So for our side lot, what we're doing is we're going at 30 feet at 2%. So we want our building pad to drain away. We want water to go away. So our side lots are a little bit lower than our building pad. So we're at 2%, and then we're going to flatten out at 0, and then we're going to go back at 2% as well. All right, so we can create different options. If we were doing this manually, we would create a feature line that is static, and we would assign slopes and PIs to them to develop each one of these lines here. We could probably develop one and then step offset and then move it to this elevation point and have our elevations run. We have a 0.6% slope on our roadway here. And this feature line is actually elevating a bit as well because it was taken from our corridor. So with that, let's go ahead and look at what our side lots. We'll go and place some of our side lots in here. So we have this family. Again, we'll edit it. We'll go through some of these settings just to make sure that we cover everything. Our primary feature lines, you can select it from a drawing. You can use it for a filter. Basically, our primary control is going to be the right-of-way here. From our right-of-way, we're sloping at a distance and a slope. We're going from 30 feet at 2%. This is going to follow our parent right-of-way, and then we have a 60-foot pad here. And if we look here, the pad is our second object, and it is 60 feet at 0. And then we have our back lot kind of grading back here. We have different formatting options. We can set our new feature lines to go on certain layers. I have it set to a grading type A and going into site A, or site 1, excuse me. And again, you can go through here and select individual objects, and we'll see that on a different family. It tells me that I have one control object is my right-of-way. That's what I want. That's what my parent is. And then I have 13 feature lines that are part of this filter. So we can do select and drawing, or we can do filter. And again, what I've used is this layer that's called grading A. So all my grading lines here are on this layer called type A grading family. So with that, it's basically gonna go through, take our feature lines, apply these elevations based on the control, and we'll see what that looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and run site A. And I have a corridor surface already created. It's this guy here, and I'm taking and I'm adding my my Sidelock grading to this guy here. I can go to this button and look at our supplemental factors. I'm adding 10 for my supplemental factors just to give a little bit more density to my surface. And then my mid-ordinate distance is 1. I don't have any curves, so I left that as default. All right, so let's go ahead and run that and see what it looks like. Probably should have rebooted my machine. It's usually runs a little bit faster than this, but go with it. All right, so I'll go ahead and close that. So what it's done is exactly what we asked it to, is taking our side lot lines. If we click on our side lot lines now, we can see the elevation points of what we asked it to do in our family. We asked it to go 30 feet back at 4%. We asked it to go flat at 60 feet and then back down again. And so actually, I think this was 2%, 60 feet at 0, and then back down. So now that we've added all these lot lines to our surface, we can actually view our surface and we'll go ahead and bring it into, I'm going to save this here, and then we'll bring it into our object viewer and just look. All right, so we can see our pads, our feature lines, it's flattening out, going back down. We have our slope coming in, and that looks pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is go back to our Autograder, and we'll look at our pads. So all these families, once you develop them, you can save them out and bring them into any other project. So you can export a family from one project into another. If it's a typical type of lot that you end up grading, you can extract those and bring them into other projects. So now we're going to do the pad. The pad is basically the same approach. It is basically going to lay a pad down, and if we look at the components here, we assigned pad A to our pad, and we gave an insertion point, which is the middle of the pad. It's rotated 90, and it's at a distance and slope. We designate a right side. My station's going from left to right, so we're going to do this side here, and it's at 4%. Again, we have settings for tessellation and different objects. One thing we want to be mindful of is we have one control and we have 13 feature lines. You have to have your side lots done before you place your pad, because it's looking at the two side lots and determining what the midpoint is. And so with that, let's go ahead and cancel that, and we'll go ahead and run pad A, and it's going to go through and lay our pads down based on the grading family that we asked it to, and also it's using that template to determine what the location or the width and length of that pad as well. So once it goes through and lays down these pads, it will add them to our surface, and we can look at that as well. So Autograder, easy way to replace the step offset once your model changes. If we wanted to change this or come up with different scenarios, we could just create new families. And if we were doing this with feature lines, we would actually have to probably remove or use reference feature lines to target other elevations from other lines, and just do step offset and build those out. But with this, we can come up with an easy approach to grade our lots. It's basically graded our side lots. We're a little bit lower, and it's graded our pads. It added all to the surface and applied it to our surface as a definition. So one thing to note is that CTC never creates proprietary objects in any of their commands. They have a ton of tools, and none of these objects are proprietary. If you gave this to somebody, or somebody else opened this file, they would not know how this was created if it was created by Autograder or another tool. So basically, these are just straight feature lines. It's just calculating and placing those pads along our elevation, using the control of our center line to determine its elevation, and moving forward on that. So let's go ahead and look at what we have so far. And I'm going to save this again, and hopefully if I can view this. Seems like my computer's a bit slow. All right, so here we go. We have our roadway corridor. Right now, we're just showing curb and gutters. We can turn on our targeting for our Corridormapper on here just to see what it looks like. We have our driveway slopes going down and our pads, and we can see on our lot lines our pad here, and it's sloping down on each end because our slope that we're tied in here is a little bit lower than our pad, and it's went and graded those out. All right, so we used this type of pad. Basically, it is a pad that is all sloping in one direction. we can run this again. It's the same approach for the other side. We can also go ahead and turn on our corridor mapper here. Since we have our feature line extracted out, we'll go ahead and turn back on our driveway entrances to our corridor. I'm selecting. All right. I probably didn't have to redo this, but we have our conditionals. I'm just going to hit OK. Again, we have a driveway left and a driveway right. They're controlled by each of those layers. It found 12 of those, and I'm just going to apply it. I didn't really have to go back to this interface. If I just did the second command there, it would go through and apply our updates. But there we go. There's our driveways, and here's our paths and our lot lines. So with that, we can go through and look at our other grading families as well. We have a couple created, and then we'll go and look at labeling our lots. So again, we have this type B here, and this one is basically using, sorry, some little factors, we'll edit our side B. It's basically using a flat 2% slope to go from the parent to the back lot. In this drawing, we have 0 features selected, and we have 1 feature line object. So what we're going to do is I'm going to control this. I'm going to basically take our side lots, and we're going to create feature lines from objects, and we're going to go through our XREF here, and we'll select on this guy and go through here and select these. And I grab too much. There. And I'll use the layer. I noticed that when I did this last time, it didn't use the layer. So I'm going to go through and select this because it should be on grading type B, because we're going to use the B approach. So I'm going to go through here and select these guys, and we'll apply a new layer. Grading family B. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's being controlled, these lot lines, by our layer of our feature line. And so if we look at our layer of feature line now, it's put it on type B. So when we go back to Autograder, we can look at our families for this pad B and lot style B. So on lot A, we went up, we went flat, and we went back down. On lot B, it's just a 2% slope. What we can do is go through our family, and we talked about selecting in a drawing or setting a layer to a certain layer. This time I'm just going to select in drawing. It's more cumbersome too, but we'll just go ahead and add them in here. So I'm going to grab these feature lines, and we'll run it with these. And so when we run the Sidelock Grading, we'll use these, and it'll create a surface and add it to our model at a 2% slope going back. So again, our parent feature is this right-of-way line. We're going to go grade back at 2% at 120 feet. We'll go ahead and we have 13 objects to grade, and we'll go ahead and hit save and close on this, and then we'll lot B. We'll go ahead and run that guy. All right, go ahead and close that. We have a little weirdness going on in our surface here. Not sure why that is, but let's go ahead and continue on, and we'll place our last pad here. So we'll use Autograder again, and we'll look at our pad left, our pad B, and we'll go ahead and go through our edit and have a look at it. It's basically using the same feature lines. It's using pad B, the insertion point. This time it's on the left due to our station of our center line. And more importantly, it's actually due to the station of our feature line. So when we extract feature lines, we got to be mindful of the direction or orientation in this inside and left side, right side is determined by that. So a lot of times you can actually put the pad on the wrong side pretty easy. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we'll run pad Bs, and we'll have them place that pad in there as well. Yeah, it's usually not this slow. I don't know, maybe it's running other applications. I don't think Zoom's that much resources to make this slower, but in any case. All right, we'll go ahead and close that. And so now we have our pad B. If we look at our pads here, our pad is high point in the middle, sloping down on each side. If we look at our lot line here, we just have a straight 2% slope going back. And I'm going to save this again, and then we'll view this one more time in 3D, and then we'll look at some ways we can label to check our design. So, you know, a lot of times when we're doing this manually with feature lines, we're constantly adding labels to look at what the elevation point is, what the slopes are. And with this approach, we can almost lay out a majority of our stuff, because we can change this at any time. If I wanted to change this slope coming up, I could just go to Autograder and change it through the family and then push it again. You can rerun this as many times as you want, and it'll delete the old and replace it with the new. So the functionality is basically building the surface or adding these components to the surface, but what it does is it removes the old and reruns the new. So you know, we think about dynamicness, and this is a way that it's sort of dynamic. It's just running through it and regenerating these objects again. And so let's go ahead and look at our whole model, and we'll look at it in 3D, and then we'll go to our realistic view. Let me go to this time. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. Go here. All right. All right, so we can see our roadway, we can see our curb, we can see our sidewalk, and our surface is on top of it, so we get a little weirdness going on. But we can see our driveways as well from our conditional targeting. And we would probably, if we're staking this out, we would want to give spot elevations for the depressed curb, because it just ends very abruptly. And so there's probably a transition here, but we would stake it out at a high point and a low point, or even the center of the driveway. But this driveway is following our model. It's going up to the sidewalk elevation. Sidewalk's at 2%, and then it's targeting out. What we have left would be to target our driveway to connect to our pad, but running out of time here, but that is a pretty easy approach as well, just adding those targets. So with that, let me go ahead and go back to our wireframe, and we'll go to plan. Okay, so now that we have this all laid out, we want to add some elevations and such. And so what we can do now is we can use Label Genie. Label Genie is an awesome labeling tool. So this will go through and label Civil 3D styles. You can create multi-leader text with fields, and you can assign that field to, it'll automatically assign that field to like a polygon. So if you had polygons for all your lots, and you wanted to easily put a label on there that was linked to that lot, you could use Autograder, and it would do it for you. Other things with Autograder is you can actually load in multiple drawings. So if you wanted to add labels to 5 different drawings, you don't even have to open them up. You can load those drawings in here. You can run the label set, and it'll open up those drawings and place those labels for you, and go through any number of drawings. We're just going to look at some of the predefined stuff that we have, and we can look at what it's actually doing. So we can label stuff in model space and paper space. Again, when we start looking at this, we can use Civil 3D labels, we can use blocks with attributes, we can use text, and we can use multi-leader text as well, and even multi-line text and multi-leader. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to load in a family that I have saved out for our webinar here, and it's basically our lot line. So right now, I think it's going to only label these guys because it's only specified on that layer. But if I click on my webinar here, lot lines, and I click load, it's going to load it into this bottom section. So with this, basically, it is a line and curve Civil 3D style. It's the anchor object is on the feature line, and it's going to anchor to each segment here. And so if I go to the formatting here, these are the styles and labels that it's choosing to use. And so it's using for lines and curves, a spot elevation and grade, and spot elevation and grade as well. So what's cool about this too is that it will also, if you have a style that's set up to use reference text, so in most cases, you know, lines and curves don't have elevations, and so you can assign a layer, a surface as well to these when you set them up. And so you can actually go through here and you can create fields and different properties. So if I wanted to add this, I can click on something and add it over to this side. You can go to different type of objects as well and create suffix and prefix if you're using a text-based object. And so for now, I'm just going to load up this guy, and then we're going to go ahead and run it. I'm running it on entire model space here, and we'll see what happens here. So let's go ahead and run it, and it tells me I found 52 objects you want me to process, and I'm going to do OK. And if you remember, we're doing elevation and slope. So again, it found 52 objects. I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that, and I'm going to zoom down here, and I specified my lot layer. It's using lot A. It didn't do lot B because I didn't set this up after I did it. So it's doing it on lot A. Every vertice that it finds is putting a elevation point, and then between those, it's adding a slope to it. So instantly, instead of going through and clicking 54 times on my drawing here, I can use Label Genie to place all these labels according to what function or feature or style that I'm using and apply it to that object. So again, I'll go to Label Genie again, and we can look at another building corner. Once you load it as a template, you can save it out as a new file, and it'll save it as an LG file. And you can specify here where those styles are actually located. So if you wanted to build something, you can use it for multiple projects. Again, I'm just going to load it, and then we're going to go look at the formatting, and basically it's using elevation and grade for these guys here. And what it's going to do is actually, let me go back to building corners, hit load. There we go. So you can see here that when we talked about reference text, it has this an object required, and it's a surface, because in this elevation points, it's using it for lines and curves, or it's using it for our feature lines, but it also wants to know at our feature lines, the anchor point is at each vertice, and the anchor object is a feature line. So it knows the feature line points and its vertices. So we have to tell it a surface. And so you can go through here, and I've already defined my surface as this road A surface, which is my corridor surface. So you just specify the object name as the surface you want, and you can use reference text inside Label Genie as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just add those. It found 48 label pot potentials. I'm going to click yes on that, and we'll see that it's gone through and it's labeled each 4 corners of our building. And the reason why I did all 4 corners, because I specified that I want it to show up at its vertex, and each vertex, it should have applied that and place an elevation point referencing the surface. So if I click on this, it's a standard Civil 3D style. You can see that the spot elevation is style is surface only, and you should be able to see in here the surface reference that it's using, and it's this guy right here. So once again, these tools aren't proprietary objects. It's using Civil 3D styles, it's using text, it's using fields, and it's just gathering the information and automatically labeling these based on the criteria that you're specifying in Label Genie. And once you get those set up, just like when you're getting stuff set up for Autograder, you can save those out and run them on any projects. If you use good layering, you can go through and make sure that you have a consistent layer, or you can just change it. It's really not that hard. So with that, go back to our presentation here, and we'll go to the next slide. All right, so in conclusion, using corridors is an efficient approach for grading residential sites, roadways. Conditional statements reduce the amount of regions and assemblies that you might generate for each of these objects. Corridormapper is a great tool to target those. You don't have to go through the interface, click 3 times to go to the properties, go to targets, select a line, and so on. 1 line per driveway. And so you can easily, with Corridormapper, you can apply those targets. You can remove those targets with the corridor cleanup, and it'll remove all those targets as well. So Autograder, we have template insertion. That's the biggest tool. That's one of the newer tools from Autograder, which will grade a template. So you have a template, which was our feature line that we defined off the side of our drawing. And we place that based on its center point between 2 feature lines, which are the side lots. And we can also change high point and low point. So if you had a steeper road and you wanted to be use the high point for your grading pad, you can easily change that in Autograder as well on this template insertion. So you have a couple options. On ours, we just did the center point of the 2 lot lines and a 4% slope back. But if our road was sloped at 4%, we could say, use the center of that feature line, but for elevation, use the high point and go at a certain slope from that high point. Template, so it also has, perpendicular grading, which we use for side lots. Pretty straightforward. You can grade your side lots, make sure they're lower than your pad, and you can push them all through different objects. You can extract those feature lines right from your CAD base file, convert them, and then start using those as feature lines, as default feature lines, or you can have it build them straight from polylines as well. And then Label Genie, Civil 3D objects, works awesome, works with reference styles. You do not have to go and click a bunch of stuff. Takes a little bit of time to set up, but you're gonna make that time up the first time you use it, especially if you have multiple drawings and you want to do the same thing. Maybe you have different phases that you're working on. Maybe it's just you have different files that you want to load in. You can run it on multiple files. Again, you can use blocks with fields. So if you wanted to label square foot or square yards of your lot, you could set up that function. You could add a prefix, suffix, and then a multiplier, so you can even change it to acres, to feet, or however you like to do it. And then it works with in-text and other type objects as well. All right, that is it for my webinar here. I'll leave you with 2 links. ATG USA YouTube page that has a ton of webinars. It has some tech talks and just different types of workflows and updates to software. And then the CTC YouTube page as well has great workflows for all the tools that are in that Sim Project suite. There's stuff on the manager suite as well, some really cool tools to track layers, and they even have this pretty cool line type generator where you can actually pull line files out of a file without having the line file and recreating the line file. And so lots of good tools in that suite as well. So with that, thank you very much.